Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to Sangat Television. Today we have a very special program. Sikh Community COVID-19 Update Show. COVID-19, this pandemic, has changed everything. It has changed the world. It has brought the world to its knees. It has affected everyone. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what work you do, everybody has felt the heat of it and is still feeling the heat of it as we pass through this very harsh reality in our lifetime. I keep saying it's a World War III situation where there's no bombs, nuclear bombs, no armies fighting, but the casualties are rising all over the world. People are suffering all over the world. Today in the show we have two very distinguished guests who are working tirelessly, fighting, working to eradicate this COVID-19, this pandemic, the war which the medical side is fighting day and night, vigorously and trying to overcome and defeat it. We're very privileged to have with us Dr. Manveer Kaur Ji. Dr. Manveer Kaur Ji, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you so much for coming to the show. And also by Surinder Singh Ji. Surinder Singh Ji, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Paji, for inviting us.
Thank you very much. Today, as I just said, we are all suffering and we're all feeling the pain, no matter who we are, whether we are a professional or we are a normal human being. This COVID-19 is really, I haven't got words to say how much everybody is suffering, mentally, physically, and the saddest part is when you lose your loved ones, you're losing your friends and families all over the world. That is heartbreaking. You've got no words to say, and it's such a thing which has really shocked, no matter who you are, it has shocked the world. Sikh community has also suffered a lot, which I think so we should not be scared to admit that we were quite negligent as well, that we thought it doesn't affect us, because as Sikhs sometimes we don't accept until the heat touches us and we feel the heat, what it is actually is. And we've seen a lot of cases in our Asian communities which have gone through this saga till now, and they're still going through, because you talk to a lot of professionals, you would be able to shed more light how many Asians are still lying in hospital, because the admission rates are the highest, what we hear from the news and everything. So if you can just shed with us from a professional point of view, Dr. Maviji, your thoughts on this pandemic. What do you think is happening?
Sure. Firstly, Uncle Ji, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
And thank you to the Sangat Ji for listening for this show. Uncle Ji, you rightfully mentioned that and it has been repeatedly in the news for the last 1 year now,
Yeah.
that the ethnic minority communities are disproportionately affected more by the COVID-19 pandemic. And consistent with this, in our hospitals in Birmingham, there are disproportionately more admissions with people from ethnic minority groups, relatively speaking. And many of these individuals are also more likely to have a bad outcome from COVID-19 compared to non-ethnic minority groups, for example. I think it's important to understand, why do we think this is? So whilst we recognise that the BME is a term that's commonly used
Yes,
nowadays,
which is quite
black
commonly used,
minority ethnic groups, Why do we think that these individuals are at high risk? I'm not sure that there is strong evidence to say it's just our genetic makeup that puts us at high risk. I think there's truth in the fact that as a group of peoples, we are more likely to have diseases like diabetes, which increases the risk for coronavirus, the metabolic syndrome, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, the combination of this puts us at high risk of having bad outcomes and being more susceptible to the COVID-19 infection. And also probably our housing structures. So traditionally we have, we live as joint families and we have very tight family units.
Sure.
And this is our strength as a social support network. But also it means that when there are so many of us in the same space and we have an airborne infection which is transmitted by social proximity, then by default we're much more vulnerable to catching that infection.
And Surinder Singh ji, from your opinion, because you're also working alongside the NHS, the Birmingham health organizations, you're working doing a lot of work with the community and with the government side of things. Is your thoughts on that?
I totally agree with Benji, the way she's put that. It's the family structure, the community structure. It's the type of jobs that our parents have, our children have, a lot of social mixing, a lot of manual kind of labour as well, which means that the infection can happen more. And again, we have big biashadiya kind parts and stuff like that, and a lot of infections happen through that. My personal experience during COVID, it was that my parents are self-isolated for nearly a year. They haven't left the house, they haven't been to the Gurdwara. Luckily, thank God, we've been kind of protected with ourselves and the community. However, my sister-in-law went to a wedding and she didn't even go to the Nand Garage. She went a day after, just to pay some respects, and this was before the lockdown, and she came back with COVID, and that was very, very poignant for us, because this is saying that the government's message out there is to keep the distance. It is the correct message. A lot of skepticism within the community about whether it's a real virus, and that's where the community has to pull together and sing from the same hymn sheet, basically, because when we start doing other things, that is when the body and the community is more susceptible to get these types of infections.
Sure. So, as we're all aware and we all say we have suffered from it, Dr. Maviji, how does the community protect itself from this virus?
Sure. I think the very simple and concise message on this actually would be just to listen and to follow the government's guidance. So the guidance that the government gives us is backed by some evidence, so there is reason behind it, and maybe sometimes we understand the reason, sometimes we don't, or even if we find it difficult to understand. I think regardless of that, to accept it and to follow it is important, because it's not just about protecting ourselves, it is also about protecting those around us. So our actions are no longer just affecting us. Our decisions and our actions are affecting everybody around us, the people that we love, our friends, our neighbours, those that we walk by on the streets. So I think the very simple message is, as the government has been saying all year, stay safe, wash your hands, wear your face mask, keep space, and follow the guidance as the government gives it to you in real time.
Sure. Surinder, would you like to add on anything on that?
Yes, it's important that we do follow these guidelines. Their guidelines are there for a reason. And now, obviously, with the vaccine coming up, and that's another area where we have struggled as a community, because it is the language barrier, it is the cultural barrier that we might have. Again, we have a lot of families, especially in the new communities that have come over to this country and settled. They probably do live in a house with probably 4 other families or 3 other families. So it's that big structure. They'll be working in manual labour or a factory or a shop setting. And again, that is the, it's like a vacuum for infection. They can just keep and get infected. And if we go to Gurdwara and we go to these weddings, and then we're more likely to get, others members affected as well. However, even in our people that have been here, like myself, born and bred in this country, parents live in isolation, they still probably do worry about doctors calling, going to the doctors without any support structure around them. And I think that's what we found as a big community, is those parents and those isolated parents that live alone, they are more vulnerable because they will not get vaccinated, because they don't understand the procedure. So as a community, we've got to really communicate better. And shows like this are going to be vital for us to get the message out there that, we must follow the guidelines.
Could I add to that, Uncle G?
Yeah, sure.
Please. Thank you. I think Baji has raised a really good point. And certainly on behalf of many in the medical profession, I think we have felt very worried in this last 1 year that there are a lot of people in the community that are not accessing help, whether, for healthcare. Because of course there is coronavirus in the hospitals, there is coronavirus outside of our homes and, in the streets, etc. But actually, if you need help, please ask for it. There are safe ways of delivering it, and to be silent is not ideal. So that's important. And similarly, I think with the vaccines, as Baji has said, there are so many myths. The vaccine, whilst is not the single-handed answer to our collective fight against this pandemic, it's a very important part of that solution. And I think where people have uncertainties, there is no such question as a silly question. It's absolutely important to ask whatever questions people want. And it's our responsibility to help one another to understand, so that ultimately we can hopefully make the best decisions for ourselves and for society and come out of this together.
But as you were talking about the communication, if you look into the society, you get all these different ethos of people. Oh, that is better than that injection. I think so. We make up our own minds without being a medical professional or a scientist that I can tell this vaccination is good. So if we can just guide our viewers, the vaccination first of all. It's not that anybody feels like a vaccination made in 2 weeks and they just dish it out and jab it into people. It doesn't happen that way, does it? Just give this scenario behind it, how much effort has gone into it. Yeah, you can just share your thoughts, because you guys would be better.
I'll just share my opinion on that. It's basically the first time the medical profession worldwide has had a single fight. We do the TB inoculations, and when we go to India, first thing we do, have we had our jabs? And this jab, again, people are saying, oh, how could they get it done so quickly? But it's gone through the whole procedures that needs to get it passed. And a lot of our people says, oh, it doesn't work on apnea people. I've heard it quite a lot. People say it doesn't work for us. Have they tested on apnea people? We've got different genetics. But the fact is, they have a pool. They've started the vaccination. Companies had already been lodging for this work, and then they knew that it wasn't working. They stopped. And the two that have gone through, and they've been accepted worldwide. And again, as you said, a lot of our communities think they are doctors, so they think they're medical professionals. And I spend a lot of time in India, and as soon as one person has a jab, everybody in the family wants a jab. And this is probably the first time we're probably thinking, oh, should we or shall we not have the jab? And again, what's in the jab, I suppose Benji can answer that better than I can. But the fact is, we've got to say that this has gone through the tests. People are getting jabbed. My parents have had the jab, and you will have some side effects. But how those side effects affect each individual will be a problem, because we don't react to the same thing to that. So the fact is, we have to think in this way: shall we have the jab and our peace of mind that we have taken all our protection, or shall we not do it and risk getting infected and having the bemari of COVID-19 hit our family even more?
I think,
add on to that,
please, thank you. So if I can first just share a reflection with yourselves. So I think this is a really unique situation. To be in a pandemic is a unique situation. None of us would have ever thought that we would have been through the experience that we have. And also, I think from a healthcare medicine's perspective, this pandemic is a unique situation, because normally when you have a vaccine, you have the vaccine. If you have the flu vaccine, it is what it is. You take it, you don't take it, it's the vaccine. We don't normally shop around for healthcare. But this is a very unique situation, that the whole world, day by day, is learning about this COVID-19 infection and its management together as a global society. And as a part of that journey is learning about these vaccines. One day there's this vaccine, and then the next week there's that vaccine. So I suppose we have a unique opportunity where we now have several vaccines, and we have a choice of potentially a choice of thinking which vaccine would we like, and therefore which one wouldn't we like. I think that from my personal perspective, the bottom line is that all of these vaccines are safe. And to have a vaccine is better than to have no vaccine. And my personal opinion is that in the UK, we are very fortunate that at least we have access to vaccines.
Yes.
There are so many countries in this world, in a world of 7.6 billion people, the UK having only 60 million, at least we have that vaccine. The majority of the world doesn't. And there's a shortage of supply of vaccines, so we might not be able to be as picky.
Sure.
So I think whatever comes your way, it's good to take that than to not take anything. As far as how quickly the vaccines have developed, so on average I think it takes about 8 years to develop a vaccine.
Yeah.
And this we have done in less than a year. But it has gone through every single stage, as Baji has said, of vaccine development, from the pre-testing in the laboratory through to the various stages in humans. The vaccines are very safe, they're very effective. They can be up to 90% effective depending on which vaccine you have. But like we said, I think a vaccine is better than none.
Definitely. And on the other thing, whichever community you're asking also, you must be going through that, is that with the new variants coming through, they keep saying, oh, this is not effective. Nobody knows that, my personal opinion. Can you just shed some light on that as well?
Sure. I mean, the viruses are known to mutate. This is why every year we have a different flu vaccine. And so it's not surprising that the coronavirus is mutating and that we have different strains coming up. So I think the first thing is we shouldn't fear this and we shouldn't be panicked about it. At least we have a vaccine, and it's giving us some protection against all of these strains. Admittedly, the vaccines give better protection against some strains than others. But again, to have some protection is better than to have zero protection. So I don't think it should be putting us off having the vaccine. It should still be encouraging us to take the vaccine all the more, so that we can develop the so-called herd immunity. And the herd immunity will be developed when majority of the population has had the vaccination, so that there's such little virus around that eventually it can be phased out.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's very important, that fact is that, with the viruses changing, we have to have that first level of protection to ourselves, and this will fight the first level of protection. And again, how people get affected by getting the coronavirus, if you can be fit, young, healthy person, you're less likely to go to the hospital or have medical care. And that's where we have to be careful in our country, because the medical profession and the hospital beds, that's all really, really limited in time. So if we do overflood it, and the government that's one of the reasons why the government have really done that, because the fact is, if you need ventilation, a ventilator, it's going to take beds. And even Benji was chatting with Benji earlier, and even hospitals have to now have social distancing amongst themselves.
Sure.
So it's really important that we do protect the NHS, which is vital for us to recover. Because if we don't have that recovery system in place, it's going to cause us bigger problems. And again, when we talk about hospitals, that's one of the big issues that we have with Asianic elder people. When they go to hospital, they don't like to go to hospital at the best time, but this time we can't even go and see them. And my father was in hospital for an eye infection. He stayed for eight days in the hospital, and I was very worried, because obviously he doesn't speak the language or doesn't understand.
Sure.
However, the hospital did a fantastic job in looking after him, and I think that's put my mind at rest. That I knew that was the situation. So it's really balancing your protection, the community's protection, with how we can cope with the infection. And these mutations of the Manaus virus, that's going to always happen, as Benji says. But as long as we get majority of the people vaccinated, that is going to give us the peace of mind and the confidence that every time we go out, we're not going to get the virus.
Yeah. The other thing which I think, so we all hear in the news, the government's focus is encouraging the communities to come forward and have the jab. And the Sikh community is also being penciled in, and you can highlight that they're not having the jab as well. So what is your thoughts on that? Why are people hesitant not to have the jab?
Baji, yourself first.
It's really the lack of understanding. I think some of our community, that if they heard a bad story, somebody's told them, and then it's just amplified the message of saying, okay, the vaccine might not be right. I shared another story that we've just did. Is we did a poster with the Nishkam and Health Brom, which is the public health authority in Birmingham, and I had a gentleman who was a deaf gentleman, and he was saying that he did not want the vaccination because a member of his family had a stroke after being vaccinated. And we took a lot of convincing convincing him to do it. And we left in a stage where he could say, could he have the vaccination or not? And I left it with him. But then I passed him a poster with all the information on it. It was in Punjabi and English, and it was a very simple poster. And from that poster, he decided to have the vaccination.
Sure.
So we have had some successes, but the main thing is when you look at how news spreads through social media, especially, and now through WhatsApp groups and YouTube groups and all this, it is negative news sells more. So if somebody listens to some negativity,
sure,
they're more likely to believe it.
Definitely.
And it's for channels like this Sangat TV to give the positive message out, and that's why I'm really happy that we have covered this point today.
May I quickly add something, Uncle?
Yeah, sure,
I'll keep it very quick.
Yeah.
I think also I do fully appreciate all the anxieties that people would have.
Definitely, yes.
I'm also human. I've had those anxieties. And being a medic as well, I've taken the time to read a lot of the science to these vaccines as they've been published in the scientific journals. And to address very concise some of the myths. So there aren't any eggs in any of the vaccines that have been authorised so far in the UK. So there's the Pfizer vaccine, there's the AstraZeneca vaccine, and the Moderna vaccine are now 3 licensed vaccines in the UK. None of them contain eggs, none of them contain any alcoholic products, and none of them have the ability to enter your DNA or to mutate your DNA. So I think this is a real risk that a lot of people have had, particularly with the mRNA vaccine. That is absolutely not the case. In fact, the mRNA vaccine is destroyed within a few hours of entering the body. And it's not unusual to have to feel feverish. It's very rare to have a recorded high temperature, but people can feel feverish. And probably that's because your body is now mounting an immune response. So your body's army is now building up the antibodies, which will be stored and which will protect you in the future if ever you get an infection. So if you're feeling feverish after the vaccine, or if you have some pain or something, the pain is probably directly related to the injection, but any fever-like symptoms are probably because your body's immune system is doing what it should be doing. It doesn't mean that you have the virus. In fact, these vaccines are not live vaccines, and they cannot give you the virus. But it's probably a good sign. It means your body's doing what it should be doing, and you're getting stronger to face the virus.
And on that point, Benji, I say, like, my mom had the vaccine, and I was really worried because every time she has the flu jab, she doesn't react well to the flu jab. And when she took the vaccine, I think it was the AstraZeneca vaccine that she had, there was no side effects. And that was one of the beauties of this vaccine, and saying I'm quite confident that it can it has the effects that it needs to.
So I've had the Pfizer vaccine. I had some pain at the injection site, which is not unusual because I had a needle in my arm. But actually after 2 days it went away, and I was lucky I had no other symptoms.
Sure. Because we'll be running out of time very soon as well. One thing which I think, so every community in the world, everybody is gearing up together to fight this, and the Sikh community is also doing that. A lot of Sikh volunteers are setting up test centers, and everything is happening because the government wants it, the NHS wants it. The more people we can vaccinate quickly, we should encourage. From your point of view, both of you are doing this very vigorously with the government, with the NHS, trying to educate everybody. It's a must that we must get this done. Last thoughts on that before we wrap up with the program.
Yes, Baji, and it's really important that the Sikh community plays its part. We are a community of seva, and we can give a seva to this global pandemic. And I think we can do more. I said some of our Gurdwara are looking at becoming vaccine centres or test centres, and the more people and more we get involved and engage with that will help our community, because our community will then feel safe going to an organisation that they have full trust with, and that may encourage more people to get tested. If they think they might have the virus, the first thing is to get tested. Once they've got tested, if they are fine, then that's good. If not, they self-isolate. But thirdly, if they go and get the vaccine from a Sikh-led, faith-based organisation, that will give us a very, very big boost on getting more of our community going and getting vaccinated.
Would you like to add on to that?
I think it's good to have local vaccination centres, because if something is on your doorstep, you don't have to travel far. Which is especially sensible at this time of the pandemic. And of course, as Baji has alluded, there's a lot to be said for cultural sensitivity, and to be given care by somebody you can relate to, of course, adds a layer of something special. Also, just while we are sharing information with the Sangat, there's been a lot in the news. Yourselves may have heard about different types of testing for the coronavirus infection. So there are the lateral flow tests that you may have heard about, and then also the PCR testing. So we thought this would be just a good opportunity to share a little bit about these different types of tests with yourselves. The lateral flow tests are predominantly being used as a screening test for people who could be at risk, for example, people who are going to schools or people who are working in care homes, and other similar sectors. This is a screening test, and basically if you have a high amount of virus in your body, then it's likely that the test will come back positive. But actually it's also possible that you could be infected with the coronavirus and the test won't come back positive. Therefore, it's only good as a screening test for those who are at the greatest risk to the population. But if the test is negative, it doesn't mean that you don't have the coronavirus infection. So the important thing is that if you have any symptoms, if you feel unwell and you think you may have the coronavirus, it's important to go through to one of the national testing centres. There are many of these in Birmingham, and to get the PCR test done, because that is much more sensitive, and that's the gold standard test that we have so far for diagnosing the coronavirus infection. And then obviously after that we go back to following the rules and self-isolating, and contact tracing anybody that we may have been in contact with.
Sure. Thank you both very much. I think so it will be very useful for the viewers and also for us to listen to and we're very proud that we have such able people of the Sikh community serving in the NHS, serving the medics, serving the community for everyone. And we should learn the experiences, the guidance. The government is guiding us, what the professionals are guiding us. There should be no doubts in our mind that we should be doing our own things, not following what we've been guided to follow and obey, and get safe for yourself and your families and for the communities. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Ji.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.